What happens when America's sweetheart of home design sits down with daytime television's most beloved host, only to have everything spiral into chaos? The tension was palpable from the moment Joanna Gaines stepped onto Kelly Clarkson's set, but nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. This wasn't just another promotional interview gone wrong. This was a collision of two powerhouse personalities that would leave audiences stunned and questioning everything they thought they knew about these beloved celebrities. Before we dive into this explosive encounter, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really happened here, because what you're about to witness will change how you see both of these stars forever. The atmosphere in the studio felt different that morning. Kelly Clarkson, usually the picture of warmth and enthusiasm, seemed unusually tense as she prepared for what should have been a routine interview about Joanna's latest home renovation project. The crew noticed it too, the way Kelly kept adjusting her notes, the way she avoided eye contact with her production team. Something was clearly bothering her, but nobody dared to ask what. When Joanna Gaines walked onto the set, her trademark smile seemed forced, almost mechanical. The woman who had built an empire on authenticity and down-home charm looked anything but comfortable as she settled into the guest chair across from Kelly. The audience, unaware of the brewing storm, applauded enthusiastically, but those paying close attention could see the rigid posture, the way Joanna's hands gripped her purse just a little too tightly. "Welcome back to the show, Joanna," Kelly began, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made her a daytime television favorite. "It's always such a pleasure to have you here." "Thank you for having me, Kelly," Joanna replied, but her smile never quite reached her eyes. "Though I have to say, I'm a bit surprised by some of the questions your producers mentioned backstage." The comment hung in the air like a challenge, and Kelly's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. The seasoned host had conducted thousands of interviews, but something in Joanna's tone set off alarm bells in her head. "Well, we like to keep things interesting here," Kelly responded with a laugh that sounded just a bit too bright. "Our viewers love getting to know the real person behind the brand." "The real person," Joanna repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "That's interesting, Kelly, because I've always been pretty transparent about who I am. What exactly are you implying?" The studio audience began to sense the shift in energy, the comfortable banter they expected from these two beloved figures taking on an edge that made everyone slightly uncomfortable. Kelly's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. But it was too late. Joanna had seen it. "I'm not implying anything," Kelly said, glancing down at her cards with a slight tremor in her voice. "I just think our audience would be interested in hearing about some of the business decisions you've made recently. The partnerships, the expansions, the way you've well monetized your family's story." The words hit Joanna like a physical blow. Her back straightened, and the mask of pleasantness she'd been wearing began to slip away entirely. "Monetized our family's story?" Joanna's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. "Kelly, I agreed to come on your show to talk about our latest renovation project, not to defend the way my husband and I have chosen to provide for our children." Of course, Kelly backtracked quickly, but she was in too deep now to stop completely. "I just meant that some people have questions about authenticity when a brand becomes as large as yours has. When does sharing your life become, performing it?" The question landed like a bomb in the studio. Even the camera operators seemed to tense, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Joanna sat perfectly still for a long moment, her green eyes fixed on Kelly with an intensity that made the host visibly uncomfortable. "Performing?" Joanna said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's what you think I'm doing." What do you think this is?" Kelly opened her mouth to respond, but Joanna wasn't finished. "Kelly, I've been in this business long enough to know when someone has an agenda. What I don't understand is why you're choosing to ambush me with it now on live television instead of having an honest conversation like adults." The accusation of ambush clearly stung, and Kelly's carefully maintained composure began to crack. "This isn't an ambush, Joanna. These are legitimate questions that people are asking. I'm just giving you a platform to address them." "A platform to address them?" Joanna's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Or a platform for you to tear down what my family has built so you can feel better about your own career choices." The studio went deadly quiet. Even the audience, who had been murmuring uncomfortably throughout the exchange, fell completely silent. Kelly's face flushed red, and for a moment it looked like she might not respond at all. "That's completely unfair, Kelly," said finally, her voice shaking slightly. "I've never been anything but supportive of you and your family. This has nothing to do with my career, doesn't it?" Joanna leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Kelly's face. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like someone is feeling threatened by another woman's success and has decided to use her talk show as a weapon." The words hung in the air between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Kelly's mouth fell open, clearly shocked by the directness of the accusation. The two women stared at each other across the coffee table that suddenly felt like a vast chasm, while cameras continued to roll and capture every moment of the escalating confrontation. "I think," Kelly said slowly, her voice tight with controlled emotion, "that you're projecting your own insecurities onto this situation. Maybe the real question here is why you're so defensive about simple questions regarding your business practices." Joanna's eyes flashed dangerously, and anyone who knew her well would have recognized the warning signs. She was done playing games. "Simple questions," she repeated, her voice rising slightly for the first time. "Kelly, there's nothing simple about what you're doing here, and we both know it." The silence that followed Joanna's words was deafening. Kelly's face had gone from flushed to pale in a matter of seconds, and her hands were visibly trembling as she clutched her interview cards. The studio audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing television history or a career-ending disaster for both women. "You know what, Joanna," Kelly said, her voice taking on a harder edge than anyone had ever heard from America's favorite talk show host. "Maybe we should talk about what this is really about, because I've been doing my homework, and there are some things your fans might be interested to know." Joanna's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in her eyes. "Is that a threat, Kelly?" "It's not a threat. It's journalism." Kelly straightened in her chair, suddenly finding her footing again. "Did you think no one would eventually ask about the contractors who've come forward? The ones who say they were pushed to work impossibly fast schedules for your television timeline while being paid below market rates?" The accusation hit the studio like a thunderclap. Joanna's carefully composed mask finally cracked completely, revealing a flash of genuine anger that made several audience members audibly gasp. "Those are lies," Joanna said, her voice low and deadly calm. "And the fact that you would repeat unsubstantiated gossip on your show says more about your character than mine." "Unsubstantiated." Kelly pulled out a folder from beneath her desk, her movements sharp and deliberate. "I have documentation, Joanna. Interviews, pay stubs, work orders. This isn't gossip, it's evidence." The color drained from Joanna's face. As she stared at the folder in Kelly's hands, for the first time since the interview began, she looked genuinely shaken. "You ambushed me," she said quietly, the accusation carrying more weight now. "You invited me here under false pretenses to blindside me with this. I invited you here to give you a chance to tell your side of the story." Kelly shot back, her own composure finally slipping entirely. "But instead of answering legitimate questions, you've done nothing but attack me personally. Attack you." Joanna's voice rose sharply, and she leaned forward in her chair. "Kelly, you've spent the last 10 minutes trying to destroy everything I've worked for, and you want to talk about attacks?" The two women were now fully engaged in battle, their public personas abandoned entirely. The Kelly Clarkson who had won America's heart on American Idol was nowhere to be seen, replaced by a hard-edged interviewer with blood in the water. Similarly, the warm, approachable Joanna Gaines had vanished, who had built an empire and wasn't about to watch it crumble without a fight. "I'm asking questions," Kelly said, her voice rising to match Joanna's intensity. "That's what journalists do. If you have nothing to hide, then answer them." "Nothing to hide?" Joanna stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the studio floor with a sound that echoed through the silent space. "Kelly, I came here in good faith, as a colleague, as someone I thought was a friend. What you've done today is unconscionable." Kelly remained seated, but her eyes followed Joanna's movement, with the intensity of a predator tracking prey. "What's unconscionable is building a brand on family values and authenticity while exploiting the very people who make your success possible." "Stop!" Joanna's voice cracked like a whip through the studio. "You don't know what you're talking about. And you're making accusations you can't prove, can't I? Kelly held up the folder again, her smile cold and triumphant. Because I have 3 contractors who are willing to go on record about working conditions on your projects. I have financial documents that show a pattern of cost-cutting. That puts workers at risk. I have testimonies about safety violations that were covered up to meet filming deadlines. Each accusation landed like a physical blow, and Joanna swayed slightly on her feet. The woman who had faced down network executives and building inspectors looked genuinely rattled for the first time in her career. Those documents were obtained illegally, Joanna said, her voice shaking with fury. And if you think I'm going to sit here and let you destroy my family's reputation based on stolen paperwork and disgruntled former employees, you're mistaken. Former employees who you fired for raising safety concerns, Kelly pressed, sensing weakness. Former employees who were blacklisted from working in the industry after they spoke up. About dangerous working conditions on your sets, that's enough. Joanna's voice was deadly quiet now, more frightening than when she'd been shouting. Kelly, what you're doing right now crosses every line of professional decency. You've turned what should have been a friendly interview into a character assassination, and I won't be part of it. Kelly finally stood as well, the 2 women now facing each other across the coffee table like gladiators in an arena. The audience was completely silent, many of them filming with their phones despite studio policies, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. The truth isn't character assassination, Joanna Kelly said, her voice steady despite the obvious tension in her body. And the truth is that your empire was built on the backs of people you systematically underpaid and overworked. The truth, Joanna repeated, her voice dripping with disdain, is that you've become exactly what's wrong with modern media. You've sacrificed integrity for ratings, friendship for headlines, and basic human decency for a few extra viewers. Don't lecture me about integrity, Kelly snapped back, her own anger finally boiling over. At least I'm not hiding behind a fake persona while I exploit working families. The words hit Joanna like a slap, and for a moment she looked genuinely hurt beneath the anger. But the vulnerability lasted only seconds before it was replaced by something harder and more determined. Fake persona. Joanna's laugh was bitter and sharp. Kelly, everything about this setup has been fake. The friendship, the collegiality, the supposed journalism, you wanted a show. Well, congratulations, you're about to get one. She reached for the small microphone clipped to her blouse, her movements deliberate and final. The gesture sent a chill through everyone in the studio, from the audience to the production crew. Everyone knew what it meant when a guest started removing their mic during a live broadcast. Joanna, wait, Kelly said, sudden panic creeping into her voice as she realized how far things had gone. Let's take a breath here. But Joanna was already unclipping the device, her green eyes never leaving Kelly's face. No, Kelly, I think we're done taking breaths. I think it's time for some action. The small wireless microphone hit the coffee table with a sharp crack that echoed through the stunned studio. Joanna Gaines stood perfectly still for a moment, her eyes locked on Kelly Clarkson with an intensity that made the talk show host visibly flinch. The audience held its collective breath, phones raised in recording, knowing they were about to witness television history. You want to know what's really fake, Kelly? Joanna's voice carried clearly across the studio without amplification, each word carefully measured and devastating. This whole setup? You sitting there pretending to be some crusading journalist, when really you're just a bitter woman who can't stand that someone else built something bigger than what you have. Kelly's mouth opened and closed wordlessly, the folder of documents still clutched in her trembling hands. The confident interviewer, who had been pressing her attack just moments before, had vanished, replaced by someone who looked genuinely shocked by the venom in Joanna's words. That's not what this is about, Kelly stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. This is about accountability, about holding people responsible for their actions. Accountability. Joanna took a step closer to Kelly's desk, her presence suddenly seeming to fill the entire studio. Let's talk about accountability, Kelly. Let's talk about how you've been struggling in the ratings for months, how your show is hemorrhaging viewers to younger, more relevant hosts, how your own network executives have been questioning whether you're still worth the investment. The accusation landed like a bomb. Kelly's face went ashen, and several crew members exchanged shocked glances. This was information that wasn't public knowledge, and everyone in the room knew it. "How do you?" Kelly began, then stopped herself, realizing she was about to confirm what Joanna had just revealed. "How do I know?" Joanna smiled, but there was no warmth in it whatsoever. "Because, unlike you, I actually do my homework before I walk into a room. I know your show is on thin ice, Kelly. I know your contract negotiations aren't going well. I know you're desperate for a viral moment, a controversy, something, anything to remind people that you still exist." The studio was so quiet that the hum of the cameras seemed deafeningly loud. Kelly looked like she'd been physically struck, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her in real time. "And you thought," Joanna continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "that you could use me, use my family's reputation, as your stepping stone back to relevance. You thought you could ambush me with fabricated documents and manufactured outrage, and that I'd just sit here and take it like some kind of victim?" "Those documents aren't fabricated," Kelly whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. "Entirely, aren't they?" Joanna's eyebrows raised in mock surprise. "Because I know exactly who you got them from. Kelly, I know about your little arrangement with Marcus Henderson, the contractor we fired for showing up to work sites intoxicated and putting my crew in danger. I know how much you paid him for his story, and I know how much you paid him to doctor those financial records." The color drained completely from Kelly's face. The folder slipped from her nerveless fingers, scattering papers across the desk and floor. Several audience members gasped audibly as they watched one of America's most beloved entertainers crumble before their eyes. Marcus Henderson, Joanna, continued relentlessly, who was arrested for fraud in 3 different states before we ever hired him. Marcus Henderson, who was stealing materials from our job sites and selling them on the side. Marcus Henderson, who threatened to destroy our reputation when we fired him and turned his evidence of theft over to the police. Kelly opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She was trapped, exposed, her carefully planned ambush turned back on her with devastating effectiveness. "So, yes, Kelly, let's talk about accountability. Let's talk about how a desperate talk show host was willing to destroy an innocent family's reputation based on the lies of a convicted criminal. All for the sake of a few rating points and some social media buzz." Joanna picked up her purse. From beside her abandoned chair, her movements deliberate and final, the gesture sent a ripple of anticipation through the studio audience, many of whom were still recording everything on their phones. "You know what the really sad part is?" Joanna said, slinging her purse over her shoulder. "I actually respected you, Kelly. I thought you were better than this. I thought you had more integrity than to stoop to tabloid journalism for the sake of relevance." "Joanna, please." Kelly finally found her voice, though it came out as little more than a croak. Can we stop the cameras and talk about this?" "Stop the cameras." Joanna's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Oh no, Kelly, this was your show, remember? This was your big moment, your viral controversy. You don't get to stop the cameras. Now, just because it didn't go the way you planned," she turned toward the exit, then paused and looked back over her shoulder. "You wanted the real Joanna Gaines, Kelly? Well, here she is. The real Joanna Gaines doesn't sit quietly when someone tries to destroy her family. The real Joanna Gaines fights back. And the real Joanna Gaines always does her homework." With that, she began walking toward the studio exit, her heels clicking against the polished floor with a rhythm that sounded almost like a countdown. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of television's most beloved personalities made her way toward the door. "Joanna, wait," Kelly called after her, desperation clear in her voice. "We can work this out. We can edit this. We can start over." But Joanna didn't pause, didn't look back, didn't acknowledge the plea in any way. She reached the studio door and placed her hand on the handle, then turned back to face the cameras one final time. "To everyone watching this," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent studio, "remember that not everything you see on television is what it appears to be. Sometimes the real story is about who's desperate enough to destroy someone else just to save themselves." She pushed open the door and stepped through it, leaving behind a studio full of shocked faces and one completely devastated talk show host. Kelly Clarkson sat alone at her desk, surrounded by scattered papers and the wreckage of what had been meant to be her triumphant moment, staring at the closed door through which her reputation had just walked out. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath, every tear that began to slide down Kelly's cheeks, every whisper from the stunned audience members. It was television history in the making, but not the kind anyone had expected when the interview began. What do you think really happened behind the scenes before this explosive interview? Was this a calculated move by Kelly to save her show? Or was there something even deeper driving this confrontation? Drop your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more shocking celebrity stories that reveal the truth. Behind the carefully crafted public images we see every day